What if I told you that one of the biggest stars in the world did something so kind, so selfless, that it changed a life forever? This is the story of Taylor Swift and a janitor named Joe. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you never miss out on heartwarming stories like this. One day, in a small Pennsylvania town, a young girl with curly hair and a guitar stood nervously on her high school auditorium stage. Her name was Taylor Swift, and she was performing at the school's talent show. The room was half empty, but Taylor didn't care. She closed her eyes, strummed her guitar, and sang her heart out. Her voice filled the room, soft at first, then growing stronger. It was a song she had written herself about dreams, hope, and courage. In the back of the room, leaning on his mop, was Joe, the school janitor. Joe was in his 60s, with silver hair, kind eyes, and a gentle smile. He didn't say much, but he had a way of making people feel seen. Every day as he swept the halls, he'd hum along to the music drifting from the auditorium. He loved music, though he never talked about it much. Life had been hard on Joe, but he carried himself with quiet dignity. As Taylor sang, Joe stopped his work and listened. There was something about her voice, something raw and real that touched him. When she finished, the small audience clapped politely, but Joe's applause was different. It was slow, deliberate, and filled with genuine admiration. As Taylor stepped off the stage, he walked up to her, his mop still in hand. "You've got something special," he said, his voice warm. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Taylor looked up at him, surprised. She had seen Joe around but had never really spoken to him. His words caught her off guard, but filled her with quiet confidence. "Thank you," she said, smiling. "That means a lot." Joe nodded, his eyes twinkling. "Keep singing," he said. "The world needs to hear your voice." Taylor didn't know it then, but those words would stay with her for years. They became a quiet source of strength, a reminder to keep going. And Joe? He went back to his work, humming softly, never expecting anything in return. That was just the kind of person he was. Years passed, and Taylor's life changed in ways she could never have imagined. That young girl with the guitar became a global superstar. She sold out stadiums, won countless awards, and became a voice for millions. But amidst the fame, Taylor never forgot where she came from. She never forgot the small-town girl who sang in a half-empty auditorium. And she never forgot Joe, the kind janitor who had believed in her when no one else did. But life wasn't as kind to Joe. Now in his 80s, he was still working as a janitor, this time at a local community center. His wife, Margaret, had passed away after a long illness, leaving a void in his life. His health was declining, his knees ached, and his hands trembled as he worked. Yet Joe never complained. He kept working, kept smiling, and kept humming softly as he mopped the floors. The community center was his second home, but even his co-workers could see the toll the years had taken on him. One day, Taylor returned to her hometown for a charity event. The concert was held at the community center where Joe worked. As she walked through the familiar halls, memories flooded back. She remembered the talent shows, the late-night practices, and Joe's encouraging words. She paused and asked a staff member, "Does Joe still work here?" "The janitor from the high school." "What?" The staff member nodded. "He does," she said, "but he's struggling. His health isn't great, and he's barely making ends meet." Taylor's heart sank. She had always hoped Joe was doing well. To hear he was struggling broke her heart. Without hesitation, she asked to see him. When Joe saw Taylor walking toward him, his eyes widened. "Taylor Swift?" he said, his voice trembling. "Is that really you?" Taylor smiled, tears in her eyes. "It's me, Joe," she said. "I'm here to thank you. You believed in me when no one else did. And now, it's my turn to believe in you." Taylor knew she had to act. After the charity event, she asked her team to track down Joe's address. The next morning, she drove to his modest home on the outskirts of town. The house was small but tidy, with a worn porch and a neatly kept garden. Taylor took a deep breath, walked up to the door, and knocked. When Joe opened the door, his eyes widened in disbelief. "Taylor Swift?" he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "What are you doing here?" He looked older now, his face lined with years of hard work and loss, but his eyes still held that same kindness Taylor remembered. She smiled, her own eyes glistening with tears. "I'm here to thank you, Joe," she said. "You believed in me when no one else did, and now it's my turn to believe in you." She handed him an envelope. Inside was a check enough money to pay off his debts, cover his medical expenses, and ensure he could retire comfortably. Joe's hand shook as he opened the envelope, and when he saw the amount, tears streamed down his face. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "This is too much," Taylor shook her head. "It's not too much, Joe. It's what you deserve. You've spent your life helping others. Let someone help you for once." But Taylor didn't stop there. She knew Joe's greatest joy was his family, his 2 grandchildren, who he adored more than anything. She set up a college fund for them, ensuring that Joe's legacy of kindness would live on through the next generation. "Your grandchildren won't have to worry about tuition," she told him. "They can focus on their dreams, just like you encouraged me to focus on mine." And then, in a moment that touched Joe's heart more than anything else, Taylor promised to stay in touch. "You're not just someone I helped," she said. "You're my friend, and I'm not going anywhere." Joe, overwhelmed with gratitude, could only nod. "I always knew you'd do great things, Taylor," he said. "But this is beyond anything I could have imagined." As Taylor left Joe's home that day, she paused on the porch and turned to him. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow over the quiet street, and for a moment, everything felt still. "You were my hero long before I became famous," she said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "You believed in me when I was just a girl with a guitar and a dream, and now it's my honor to be yours." Joe stood in the doorway, his eyes glistening with tears. He wiped them away with the back of his hand, his voice trembling as he replied, "I always knew you'd do great things, Taylor. I could see it in you, even back then. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined. You've changed my life in ways I can't even put into words." Taylor smiled, her own eyes misty. "You changed mine first," she said, "and I'll never forget that." With one last hug, she walked back to her car, leaving Joe standing on the porch, clutching the envelope she had given him. He watched her drive away, feeling a mix of gratitude, disbelief, and hope. A hope he hadn't felt in years. The story of Taylor Swift and Joe spread quickly, touching the hearts of millions. News outlets picked it up, social media buzzed with praise, and fans everywhere were inspired by Taylor's act of kindness. But for Taylor, it wasn't about the headlines or the praise. It wasn't about being seen as a hero. It was about giving back to someone who had given her so much, even if he didn't realize it at the time. And for Joe, life changed in ways he could never have imagined. He was able to retire comfortably, spend more time with his grandchildren, and even take a trip he'd always dreamed of, a visit to Nashville, where Taylor arranged for him to attend one of her concerts. As he sat in the front row listening to her sing, he couldn't help but smile. The girl he had encouraged all those years ago had become a woman who was changing the world, one act of kindness at a time. So what's the lesson here? It's simple. Kindness changes lives. Hope transforms the impossible. And sometimes, all it takes is one act of love to change everything. Because in the end, we're not defined by what we have. We're defined by what we give. And that is what makes life truly beautiful.